Hi, I'm Janice Switlo, and today I'm going to start to take you through some important history that preceded the establishment of the United Nations. It's important to understand kind of the foundations, the thoughts, the intent behind these kind of organizations. And in particular, I'm going to speak today about the League of Nations. And going a little bit earlier than that, just to set the stage, there was a Holy Alliance, previous, that was a union of monarchs and not of peoples, a union for peace, but against progress, against democracy, and often against nationality. It became a league of sovereigns that aspires to bind all Europe in chains, it was said. Yet it caused this progress forward on discussions. And this is back in the late 1800s when in the Hague conferences of 1899 and 1907, there was fuller expression as to how to proceed. But it wasn't until after World War I that the League of Nations came together with the sealing of a League Covenant. And it says, as finally adopted, the covenant was largely the work of British and American delegates. The aim of the League is, quote, to promote, this is the 1924 book, Short History of Modern Peoples of the West. And it's important to point out that nowhere in that book is there any discussion of Indigenous nations and nationals, because they were not considered quote-unquote modern peoples at this time. So as finally adopted, the aim was to, quote, to promote international cooperation and to achieve international peace and security by the acceptance of obligations not to resort to war, by the prescription of open, just, and honorable relations between nations. Sounds good, right? These objects are to be attained through the organs of the League. And there, as of September 1923, there were 54 nations that were bound by that covenant. Outwardly, it has the appearance of a supreme world legislature, but in reality, it exists for consultation and the exercise of influence rather than for authoritative actions, and its formal decisions must be unanimous. It elects 6 temporary members of the Council of the League and debates the annual reports, etc. The Council consists of 1 permanent representative each from Britain, France, Italy, and Japan. Remember, this is speaking current, present tense, because this is what was in place at the time this book was published. And of the elected representatives of Belgium, Brazil, Czechoslovakia, Spain, Sweden, and Uruguay. It is entrusted with the general direction of the League's activities through the Permanent Secretariat at Geneva and the special commissions. They were to undertake special tasks and the welfare of the mandated territories, international cooperation for economic, social, and intellectual progress generally. Now, what is interesting is that Canada was, of course, involved in this. And it said that the members of the League undertake to respect and preserve, as against external aggression, the territorial integrity and existing political independence of all members of the League. Now, this is where you first come across this discussion of territorial integrity. And of course, that permeates everything that the subsequent body, the United Nations, is all about. And people will find that clause inserted in United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Again, it's all about preserving who they were and how they saw themselves and what they asserted they had as of this time. That carried over. So in the case of any such aggression, or in the case of any threat or danger of such aggression, the Council shall advise upon the means by which this obligation shall be fulfilled. Now, it's interesting to see what Canada had to say about this. In the 1923 Assembly at Geneva, Canada presented an interpretive resolution which stipulated that in each case, the Council should take into consideration the geographical and political situation of each member nation, and that no country should be obligated to participate in any act of war without the authorization of its own parliament. If you consider those words carefully, where Canada is saying, no, hold up, right? We think you should consider our unique circumstances. Why was Canada so adamant about that? Well, because territorial integrity of what, right? Who's actually owning underlying title? Keep in mind at the time there was actually a nation, Indigenous nation, that was trying to join the League of Nations. But I don't have the full details of what transpired, but clearly they did not become a member, and that would be because Canada was already a member, and Canada was desperately trying to preserve some concept of territorial integrity even at that stage. So the following article eventually declares it to be the right of each member of the League to bring to the attention of the Assembly or of the Council any circumstance whatsoever which threatens to disturb international peace. Now, the Crown is still bound to preserve the peace. The Dominion of Canada's federal government under the Constitution Act 1867 is required to govern the interests of peace and good governance. And so, like I said, it's sort of subtle, and I may be losing you on this, but the fact is Canada couldn't accept the basic premise upon which the League was established in order to prevent warfare. Now, keep in mind, Canada is still bound by the treaties, but what they were fully intending and what their actions had been to date were to undermine those treaties, to deny the actual existence of title in the original holders still, because those were not treaties of capitulation. And they were having to rely on this, concept of an assertion of sovereignty to try to bolster their limited political sovereignty that the Crown had achieved through treaties. So if you move forward to this book of 1958, which is a short history of Canada, and it speaks again about Canada's role in the League of Nations, and this is its foreign policy from 1918 to 1939. In foreign policy, Canada was mainly occupied with establishment of her status as an autonomous country. Otherwise, the Dominion did not take a strong line. The Dominion of Canada, Dominion. Many Canadians regarded the League of Nations as an effective guarantee of world peace. But Canadian policy tended to weaken the League by coolness to the inclusion of effective sanctions in the Covenant. Why would Canada be cool to effective sanctions in the Covenant? Because, and certainly because there was an Indigenous nation asking to join, Canada is well aware that they may well have been the first to which the Covenant would apply because of the actions and the kinds of things that I discuss as Canada being and continuing to be an outlaw nation. So to some extent, Canada served as a spokesman in the League for American isolationism. In the critical 10 years before 1939, Canada followed the example of the League countries in failing to advocate strong measures to check aggression. Again, because it would have been too hypocritical of Canada to be, and this is still the case, right? This has always been Canada's problem. They have to be kind of wishy-washy on some stuff because, on some international relations stuff, because they know full well their weaknesses in their own situation back home in terms of the nation-to-nation relationship with the Indigenous nations. This is why Canada works so hard to get the Indigenous nations through their nationals to abandon what they have, to capitulate and say we never were a nation, so that Canada can then sort of whitewash, literally, its history and point out how Canada's always been honorable because there were no extenuating and warlike circumstances that interfered. So for right now, and I did not intentionally add sirens there to alert the importance of this, but good timing. So that's all I have to say for now about this. Thank you.